everyone. Isn't it so amazing to be here in a room all together, for real, not digitally. It's amazing. I feel really honored. Thank you for being with us. My name is Vanessa Kirby. I'm an actress and a film producer. And we are here at the Dubai Expo, in case you didn't know, for this really special and unique panel and discussion that is between artists and activists collaborating to preserve the planet, something which I myself have become particularly passionate about recently. But collectively, as a species, I think we're facing the biggest challenge of our times. And so this is really unique in bringing this group of people together. I feel honored to be here. And we're in this sustainability pavilion, which is very fitting and right. And I'm honored to be here to listen to you all and to learn. I feel like I have so much to learn, so I can't wait for what you're going to say. And Kate, who is from Amazon Frontlines, is someone that I've just started working with last year. And they've allowed me to start working with them. I'm very proud to be their first ambassador. And even though I'm an artist and what we'll be discussing is artists collaborating, I really think it will be an opportunity to explore how different people from different areas, different backgrounds, different divisions, different sectors, different work can collaborate and come together to do something, firstly within ourselves individually, but then together to unite, because I think unifying is essential. So I would love to introduce the four of you. We have Kate Horner, as I've mentioned. She's the Deputy Executive of Amazon Frontlines, which defends indigenous rights and life and culture in the Amazon rainforest. We have Thyago, Nogueira, who is an exhibition curator and the head of contemporary photography department at the Instituto Nogueira Salas. Yeah, I didn't practice that one. And he's the curator of this incredible exhibition by the artist Claudia Anjua, right? Called The Yanomami Struggle, on the indigenous Yanomami people's rights to their land and their culture. And Mélanie Laurent, the actress, incredible actress and filmmaker, who directed the award-winning documentary called Tomorrow, which highlights solutions around the world to tackle climate change and the global problem. And Salma Abdulai, last but not least, a social entrepreneur on a mission to tackle climate change while bringing economic empowerment and food security to African communities by reviving, I find this so fascinating, reviving the cultivation of a defunct cereal, fonio. So I can't wait to hear about all of that. So let's give them a warm welcome now that they're here. So we have 45 minutes, and we're going to hear about your stories which led you as individuals to come to the path that you're on, and then talk about your collaborations and how those unique collaborations have amplified or inspired or expanded, I guess, the visions that you guys have had and the message that I think we're all able to emit in our own individual lives in different ways. So, Kate, should we start with you? And would you tell us a little bit about Amazon Frontlines and the work you do? It's been life-changing for me to learn, actually, about the work you guys have done. And would you talk about that, and also talk about Monte, who is a co-founder and one of the, I think, the loudest voices, really, in talking about protecting the rainforest of the Amazon. So, yeah.
It'd be my pleasure. Firstly, I'm so thrilled to be on the stage with you and to talk about the collaboration that we've been able to pursue over the course of the last year. And it's a privilege to be with all of you. And I have the honor of introducing a short message from a woman who I am still learning a great deal from. She's a powerful and visionary indigenous woman from Ecuador. She comes from an area in Ecuador that is one of the most pristine and beautiful forests in the world. It's an area that sees thousands of rivers descending from the spine of the Andes to create the headwaters of the entire Amazon basin. And it's one of the most biodiverse places in the world. And unfortunately, it's also one of the most threatened by oil companies and miners and loggers. And Nemonte's people have been living in this land for thousands of years, learning the ways of the forest and learning how to live and walk amongst the forest. It was actually only 70 years ago that her people were first contacted by outsiders. And over the course of the last 70 years, they've seen waves of violence and invasion by oil companies and miners and loggers who are seeking to extract resources from their land. But Nemonte's father actually remembers a time before contact. And Nemonte herself didn't see concrete even until she first left her forest home at 15 years old. So part of her struggle is really not only based on the wisdom of her people that have been living in this land for thousands of years, but also the struggle of what they faced for the last 70 years of invasions. She's someone who's really heard the call of her ancestors and of her people to defend her rights. And she would have loved to be here with all of you, but she just gave birth a couple of months ago in a hammock in the forest in her territory, surrounded by her family. So it's harder to get papers for infants born in the forest to travel. But I have now the great privilege and honor of showing you a glimpse of this majestic forest and sharing some of the words of a truly inspiring and visionary leader, Nemonte Nkimo.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Nemonte Nkimo, soy mujer Waurani, líder de la comunidad Waurani de Nemompare del Pastaza. Porque es muy importante, la selva nos ha dado vida para nosotros como pueblos indígenas. A través de la selva tenemos nuestra vida, el agua, los animales, las maderas, las medicinas ancestrales que todavía tenemos y vivimos con esa práctica. Y también gracias de esta Amazonía que defendemos por miles de años, nos estamos aportando el oxígeno y el agua al mundo. Si nosotros no protegemos, no habría la vida para la humanidad. Esa parte es muy importante, es el deber. Todos los seres humanos que vivimos en sociales en el mundo tenemos que hacer un solo causa para la vida, porque es muy importante, porque nosotros sabemos como pueblos indígenas, si no defendemos nuestra Amazonía, nos va a acabar directamente a nosotros, como afectando a nuestros pueblos, a los indígenas, a los animales, a los ríos, a todos los seres que viven en la Amazonía, y también nos afectaría al mundo, cambio climático. Por eso es importante cuidar y proteger no solamente pueblos indígenas, sino todo el mundo que vivimos en esa tierra, en ese planeta, para detener y para dejar en futuras generaciones. Por eso es importante, los activistas, los sociales, junto con ustedes, sí lo podemos detener y cuidar la Amazonía. Los jóvenes y los niños tienen que aprender a respetar a la tierra madre, porque la tierra madre no está esperando que salvemos. La tierra madre se necesita que respetemos. Eso significa, por miles, siglos, años, nuestros abuelos, nuestras abuelas, ellos sí respetaban a la tierra madre, y por eso, gracias a ellas, tenemos esa tierra extenso. Por eso es importante que ahora, juventud, podemos seguir el mismo camino, esta misma valoración, este mismo respeto. Si nosotros nos respetamos, los jóvenes solo pensemos por ahora, el presente, no lo vamos a dejar para el futuro. Nos vamos a determinar nuestro territorio, nos vamos a determinar la vida de los seres humanos. Eso es importante, dar el mensaje a los jóvenes, a los niños, que siguen amando a la selva que nos está dando vida.
It must be amazing to work with her. I've learned so much from her in the time that I've had, and she is becoming such a global voice for the movement. Can Can I ask you to describe the work you guys are doing at the moment? And it's because it struck me as being about so much about our relation, how we relate to nature, and how disconnected we can be in cities and, you know, our version of civilization. And so would you just share with us what your story is and what the Amazon Frontline story is and Namonte's?
Yeah, I think it was really born from a conviction that the world is facing the twin crisis of an ecological tipping point and a cultural tipping point. And for many of these communities who have sustained thousands-year-old way of life that's protected forests are at risk of disappearing, and partly because they have just labored in obscurity and suffer under this kind of crushing violence of invisibility. And one of the things that Namonte says all the time is we can no longer fight with our spears alone. We need new strategies, and we need new tools, and we need new alliances. So that's really what we try to do at Amazon Frontlines, is to build power with indigenous peoples to battle the climate crisis by securing indigenous guardianship. And we make sure that we are offering and providing the tools and resources and alliances that are needed to be able to sustain these battles in the long term. So when the government of Ecuador tried to auction her ancestral homeland off to the highest bidding oil company, it meant that we could work with the young people and the elders to produce the first of its kind map of indigenous territory and showing the extraordinary relationship that these people have with their forests. And we use that map then as a key piece of evidence in a court battle against the government. And we built a powerful global backing with supporters around the world who wanted to participate and offer their voice to this struggle, with celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio and now new voices like your own. And it showed the government that indigenous peoples were no longer invisible. The world was standing alongside of them in their struggle. And in 2019, we won that battle, protecting almost 1 million acres of pristine rainforest land, setting aside almost 6 million additional acres through a legal precedent. And right now, the Constitutional Court of Ecuador is hearing these cases in an attempt to create nationwide precedent about indigenous people's right to decide what happens on their land. And that's the power, I think, of some of these alliances that we're talking about. It's about showing the stories and the vision and the creative new ways of relating to the earth that can give us a vision and a possible hope of solving the climate crisis and standing shoulder to shoulder in that fight and showing up for each other. The last thing that maybe I'll just say is that one of the great transformational powers that I see in working with Namonte is it doesn't just give me the opportunity to struggle and to fight alongside her in her worthy cause, but it also means that I am transformed with a new vision of how to relate to the world. And I think that's one of the beauties of these kinds of alliances and collaborations.
That's such a beautiful thing to say, because I do feel like, as I've said, it's a kind of existential shared feeling we all have of kind of hearing things and knowing what we're sort of heading towards, and I'm so inspired by that. And so Thyago, you collaborated with Claudia, right, who's done a beautiful exhibition on the Yanomami indigenous people. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear your story and to share with us about what your journey and theirs and Claudia's and what you'd like to share with us about that.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. As you said, I'm an art curator. So I work in a museum and an institution in Brazil that takes care of archives and archive states of photographers. And I think for many years, I've been working with Claudia Andujar, this artist that is actually an immigrant from Europe. She ran away during the Holocaust because she had Jewish ancestry. And she was born in 1931. And so she arrived in Brazil in mid-50s and worked as a photojournalist and someone very interested in people that are vulnerable in marginalized communities. And I think around 1970, she decided that she really wanted to take more time and understand and do a long-term work. And she got a grant to visit the Yanomami indigenous people in north of Brazil. They're really on the northern border of the Amazon, near the border with Venezuela. And she went there and she was just fascinated by what she found out, and she really started to travel and stay there, and at a certain moment she decided to live there. And for some years, she developed a very strong and powerful way to represent the shamanic culture through her own photography. She was really trying to represent and photograph things that were invisible and share that knowledge that she was having with the Yanomami to us, to our society. But it happened that in the height of this experience, in the mid-70s, we were in dictatorship in Brazil, and the dictatorship decided to build a huge program of infrastructure in the Amazon, which they considered, of course, an empty green land. And they just arrived with thousands of workers and companies and trucks and everything, and started to build roads in this isolated region. And it was a disaster. All these people from the Yanomami started to be killed by the epidemics that were spread. You know, they were defenseless against those diseases. They were being killed by guns, by violence, by alcoholism, prostitution, everything that there is bad that we invented, we brought to the land. And it was really a massacre. And Claudia saw that, and she was completely desperate, to avoid another kind of genocide, to stop. And so she went back to São Paulo. Actually, she was expelled from the land for denouncing that genocide, and she couldn't go back to the land. And so she decided to create an NGO to try to protect and demarcate the land as fast as she could. And for, let's say, the next 14 years, Claudia and some other friends that were very connected to indigenous rights, and then the Yanomami themselves, they gathered together in a very powerful fight in Brazil to try to stop that violence and really demarcate and protect the land. And it was, as you can imagine, a very difficult fight against, very powerful public interests, private interests, economic interests, and very dangerous fight also to do during dictatorship in Brazil. But against all odds, they eventually won in 1992, and they could demarcate the biggest continuous indigenous land in Brazil dedicated to the Yanomami, which is the size of 2 Switzerland in the northern part of Amazonia. And this was, let's say, a very successful story and a very tenacious story of Claudia's determination and her ability really to work with many people and collaborate in this struggle to set something. But this is exactly the story that we are now seeing, be challenged by the new government in Brazil.
Yes. So I bet she's feeling even more urgent to, spread her message as well. And so, Salma, would you tell us about your journey to the work that you do, which is so unique?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think the journey started with my mom. We are 6, but she always tells me that when she gave birth to me, it's like the whole poverty came on her head. She said she worked a lot as labor on people's farms, and it still wasn't enough to take care of us. So she had to start doing some petty trading, getting kerosene and selling from home to home just to get additional income to care for us. And, I just didn't understand why, in my case, it was worse, because we are 6. So, and I'm the 5th one, And when she finished narrating the story, I asked her what was the reason why she had to, because my whole village, I think 99% of the people that live there are farming. They are all farmers. So why wasn't she farming, instead of working? And she said, I'm a stranger in the community. I didn't understand that. And I said, why are you a stranger? She said, because I'm married to this community. I'm not coming from this community, so they will not give me any land to farm. And where I was coming from, because they know I'm going to be married off, they didn't actually give me any land as well. Because if they give me the land, I'll bring it to my new family, and they will own the land, because if you marry your husband, he will take up the land. So then you don't have any option than to go and work on, people's farms as labor to make ends meet. When she narrated the story, I said she would be the last woman to go through this. Her generation will be the last, whatever ways that I could do, you know. I think it was, for me, it was a signal to tell me that we need to end this. But this was just about culture. This wasn't about, you know, policy of, you know, government, or it's just about culture that is so dominating, you know, that marginalizes women to go through this. So, you know, growing up, finishing school, I worked in the NGO sector. We did a lot of advocacy on how to get women to have access to land. But one way or the other, when we compensate the men to give the land to the women and the project finish, the men take back the land again, you know. So it became so tough, you know, to deal with it, and you cannot change the culture. It's ingrained, you know, in our development process. So when I realized fonio was a crop that could grow on marginal soils without fertilizer application, the first thing that clicked my mind was this will be something that is going to give me the solution. Because women do not have a lot of money to go into farming, but without fertilizer application, which is so much cost to them, they can easily farm fonio, and it can also grow on these degraded lands. And after continuous production for 3 years, the land it regenerates the land, and the woman can now use it to, you know, grow other crops. So we started with 10 women to pilot, you know, after I went through my master's degree, and our lecturer was saying that if we grow fonio, because where I come from is very dry, you know, and he was saying that this is what is going to help us with food security issues. And I saw that, and I realized that this is something that we have in our community, but we used not to grow it. We just go to the wild and pick it up and, you know, process at home. So when he mentioned that, I didn't know the name in English, you know, I only knew the name in my local language. But the description looked like what I knew, so I called home, and my uncle sent me some few, and I showed it to him, and he said, yes, this crop, it can grow anywhere. It can even grow on rocky areas. And immediately I heard that, I didn't even finish my master's, I just went back. And I went to the village, and I told the chief that I wanted to do this with the women. And he told me it wasn't going to succeed, because I know that women don't own land. If I want to grow it, I need to work with men. And I told him I want to work with women. He thought I was joking. And I slept in his house for 2 days. Then he realized that I wasn't going anywhere. So he now called the sub-chiefs and then told them that I really want this woman to go back to where she's coming from, and this is what she's saying. And she insists that she wants to work with women. And then I told them I want to pilot and see, because this is not grown. I want to pilot on 10 acres and see, and I want to work with women. And finally, they gave me the 10 women, you know, after I insisted. And we piloted it, and it grew very well on those rocky areas, very well, and they got good harvest, you know. And that started the journey of liberating these women from this cultural inheritance thing they have, that men, you know, hands over inheritance to men, and men, you know, your father will give you to the son will give to the son, and the women were left out, you know. And we have reached a point where last year we did an impact survey, and we realized that 60% of the women now are intercropping with other crops. They don't grow fonio, but they grow other crops on the land. So when the men realized that, then there's another level of fight, because now they wanted to claim the land back, you know. And we had to collaborate with the chiefs from the higher level, the macro level, in order to ensure that we preserve that land for the women. And not only that, we proceeded to make it a policy in such a way that the woman, after working on that land to make it fertile, can also have the opportunity to give it to her daughter, and her daughter will give it to her daughter, and her daughter will give it to her daughter, just like what the men are doing. Because that is what we need to do to create this generational like I promised my mom, it has to stop. And if it has to stop, we needed to intentionally do something that will stop that marginalization that is keeping women in poverty and that's making women work so hard and earn little, you know. So that's how FONU started. Today we work with over 3,100 women across the Northern Sahara zone. And we're proud to say that these women have access to land. These women are now just not growing FONU, they are growing other crops, and they are making money, and they are feeding their families, they are sending their children to school, and more importantly, they are living up to the social responsibilities, and they are contributing greatly, you know, to the environment, because they make these lands fertile, and with continuous growing of FONU, you can only make it better, you know, so.
That is such a beautiful inspiration you had and follow through. Yeah. So, and obviously, you know Mélanie, right? You guys have actually collaborated on the Women's Pavilion itself.
Yeah.
And so, Mélanie, would you tell us about your journey and your relationship to the environment? Obviously, you made your documentary, I know you said 7 years ago. 7 years ago? Feels like, yeah.
Last century, but
So that's been a long journey, really, in terms of, you know, your instinct, you know, and your desire to make something like that 7 years ago. And so, how has that grown? What is your relationship to it now? And how have you guys collaborated as an artist and an activist?
let's maybe start with that, because now everybody can understand why I was so moved and why I was so honored to work with you, and Cartier gave me that absolute amazing opportunity to have a space to feel with like art, like a sort of dream, you know. And I'm super happy you're part of it. And it was a crazy journey, and I did a sort of like a VR experience, very immersive. And I had the chance to meet so many amazing people and so amazing women, and I guess that's what art does, you know, when you can move the world. And the poetess yesterday, Mahoud, just like couldn't stop crying yesterday, and I was realizing how important it is to always have those moments and those artists who's gonna just bring hope and also emotions and tears, because we need that. The documentary was made 7 years ago almost, and it's very depressing to say that, but we were one of the most first optimistic documentary about ecology ever made, which doesn't make any sense almost for theatrical. And I thought I was absurd that nobody really wanted to only search solutions. Before that, we had only absolutely dramatic and very depressing documentary who was saying like the truth, who was really talking about Amazonia, who was really talking about all the drama in the world, and we needed those. But I think the people at some point couldn't feel connected because they were like too scared probably. So that documentary was also here to see all those beautiful solutions and meeting all those beautiful people and talk about like economy, agriculture, education, obviously, and how we could just build a world who totally could work 7 years ago. And I had so much hope in a way, and the reaction of the people, and, you know, like feeling people could be connected. And again, there is nothing more beautiful than a theatrical screen who can just like have so many people together in the same room and who can share after screening some ideas. And it was a great place to screen a documentary like this. And then 7 years later, I'm like, okay, we have the solutions. Like, obviously, so many other documentaries have been made beautifully, worked everywhere in the world, and we know exactly what we should do. We know exactly how things could be not fixed because it's obviously too late, but we know how we can at least fix our own mistakes. And I think the documentary was also talking about like how, as a citizen, you can make the first step, then do something, working local, and help. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. And I just realizing 7 years after, and I'm so obsessed and upset about the climate change and all those degrees. Like, we just reach out every single year, and all those COP and all those leaders who just like around the table, we talked about that, around the table, who just like says like, okay, it's gonna be dramatic. The next year is gonna be dramatic for everybody, poor and rich, everywhere in the world. And they're still talking every single year. And the GIEC numbers are the same since the 70s. And we know exactly what we should do, and we don't do it. So after all those years, I just realized, yes, citizens can do something. Yes, artists can definitely be part of that, but also entrepreneurs. Like, we need them. We definitely need those huge enterprises to do the work, to change the print, the carbon print. We need to lower those numbers. We need to do something. The ocean right now are losing all the corals, which is dramatic. We talk about it, but do we enough? I don't know. So the ocean right now are capturing all those degrees. So they're saving ourselves right now. But in few years, they're not going to be able to do that, because without coral, we have no fish. With no fish, you have no life. And with no life, you cannot do your job. So when we're going to be in that tipping point, you know, what are we going to do? So I think we're a good example, all of us, and all those people in the Women Pavilion, and everybody here today in that crazy exhibition. We're here to just like provide some solutions, for sure, ideas, emotions, but we need huge entrepreneurs to do the work, because they do the biggest print carbon. And if they don't low down that, we're not going to be able to make it. So I'm still positive, because I'm still like very moved by every initiative, and I'm super moved by the power of moving other people with art. And I think that's, you know, but you know, it's not going to be enough at some point soon.
And so, talking about solutions and feeling hopeful, maybe we can share together, because I feel like we're all united in this room. We're all here probably because we care, which is the beginning, I guess. And I know I felt sometimes helpless, because you see the leaders meeting and they're representing us, and yet we walk the same land, we breathe the same air as everybody, including the rainforest. And obviously you say the ocean is so precious, and who's protecting it? So I would love to hear from you all about really tangible solutions for the individual interacting on a bigger scale, even beyond your country or whatever, because I would like to know how I can help more. And I guess, you know, Kate, the rainforest is as precious as the ocean, and every meter squared of rainforest that's torn down because some oil company wants to make more money, and systems haven't changed. Is there something that, what could you guys share? Because in a way, when we all get lit up to make some difference, that is collaboration, you know? And so, I'd love to hear from you all about your ideas or knowledge or wisdom for that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really important one right now, because I think, as many have said, we are at a really important moment where we know that the stakes are really high, and we know that we need to act quickly and decisively and aggressively. And where we work, regrettably, the folks in power, the newly elected president, has decided that instead of following the path that's been laid out to protect these forests, he's issued 2 executive decrees to double oil production, which is all in indigenous territories, and expand mining. But the indigenous movement is growing and resisting and offering a compelling, powerful voice for change and a new approach. And the court case that I mentioned earlier is a very live battle. And we know in Ecuador that they respond to pressure from the global community. And so offering your voice to that fight, I think, will have real, tangible benefits for people who are protecting the forest, people who are putting their lives on the line every day to steward these incredible lands. And one other thing that I thought I would just say is that, you know, I too struggle on a daily basis with concern and a sense of pessimism about our ability to solve these crises. And one of the things that I think is really powerful about art and about story is a new vision for the future. And I think that looking to the leaders of indigenous movements around the world for a relationship with the land that, as Nemo says, is about respecting the earth. She doesn't need saving. She needs to be respected. And as much as we can learn from and listen and hear those stories and hear about that wisdom and those life experiences and bring that into our hearts and minds and allow ourselves to connect with the earth around us in a different way, I think will help sustain our movements and our pressing need for decisive action.
Thank you. And Thyago, what would be your message? Because obviously from an indigenous perspective, I guess, yeah, what can be done? What can we do? I think is ultimately the thing that
I think we can do a lot. I mean, I really, as I said, I've studied the life of Claudia. She's 90 years old right now, and she has dedicated 50 years of her life to defending an indigenous population in Brazil, which was not her family, which was not related to her origins, but just because she felt this was the ethical thing to do and the best thing to do and the most important and urgent thing to do. And I think from the life of this woman, there's already a lot to learn. Yeah. But this is also a story of how a woman started this NGO and then collaborated with the Yanomami in their vision of the world and gathered people around them and slowly started to organize political movements and political actions and campaigns to really press at a certain level the Brazilian government to do something that was completely unbelievable, which is really demarcate a land of this size. And this has never happened in the history of Brazil and probably in very few countries. So you know, in one way, I do believe in the power of a single person to really move and push things. But also I feel it's important that we don't, you know, we understand that we need to join forces and really structure people that are already looking and working and fighting for social causes and justice, that we really need to integrate other fights and not try to see it just from the individualistic point of view.
Yeah.
If I might add something also, I mean, the story of Claudia has taught me too that, you know, as much as art is strong and it's very important and can be politically relevant to open up our senses to other visions of the world, to other understandings of the world, to other feelings and etc. There are limits that art can do. And I'm an art curator and I feel really, and I think Claudia saw that, you know, at a certain moment she said, well, art is not enough. I will have to go into direct activism. So she moved away from art and said, you know, people are dying in the forest. They're disappearing. This whole culture, language, vision of the world, knowledge is going to just disappear if I don't do anything. And then she really entered direct political action, raising money, talking to politics, giving discourses on the Congress, and doing all sorts of things that were, I mean, possible for the demarcation. So I feel there's always this, you know, tension until how much, I mean, we can help as an individual, how much we can really integrate a collective fight that is already going on. I mean, people have been fighting for 500 years or more. And also, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's...
No, that's beautifully said. And really what I sent you saying is like anyone could be an activist in your own life, in your own way. And you find the roots that, you know, that you are led towards. And I guess if you begin asking the questions, you find each other. You find other people to help you activate the activist in you, whatever that looks like. And so you guys found each other, didn't you, Mélanie and Salma? So we have 5 minutes left, so I'd love to hear from you both about what your ideas for, you know, having found each other and collaborating that way, what your ideas are for anyone who is looking for solutions, you know, and as a global population, what they are.
I think the first time I got an email about the collaboration, I was so happy, I was so thrilled because this is like a higher level collaboration. which is going to bring something very unique. And for us, you know, collaboration has been the way we go from day one. And we think collaboration means two things to us: love and commitment. You know, for the desired goal, you need to be able to see it and say that you want to be part of it and you love to be part of it. And then the second thing is you have to be committed, you know, to getting that vision. So seeing that that desired goal is achieved. So that is what it means. So that is what that collaboration meant to me, you know. And having to solve these environmental issues should be ingrained in individual choices, I believe, because when we do that, that is the basic level of collaboration we start first, even before we migrate to the level of communities, local communities, and then to the level of the collaboration that I had with Mélanie. And for me, that is beautiful. That is the only way we can shared responsibilities can be achieved, because this climate change is a huge thing, this environment is a huge thing. One individual person will not be able to solve it. So these collaborations are so important, and they are very deep-rooted, you know, in getting these problems solved. Because somebody can be in Kenya, somebody can be in, you know, Nigeria, but once you collaborate, you can replicate, you know, these things in your areas, and combine, you can be able to solve the issues that we have. So I think the collaboration was so great, and for me, I'm so sure to see her in person. Yes, yes.
No, I'm just realizing how we missed that because of that pandemic. You know, like we just worked through Zoom. It was so frustrating. Connection were so bad. We're like trying to explain things and sharing things, and then the first thing, and I'm sorry, but the first thing I did when I saw her was touching her. I almost kissed your arm. I was so happy. and we need. I mean, it's going to be very naive to say that, but I think we need more love and more empathy, you know? I think we're judging also ourselves a lot. Like, we're judging countries, we're judging culture, we're judging, like, that country doesn't make enough. Well, no country does enough right now. There is not a good example of a government and a politic who's just like, wow, they are the good example. So we should stop judging everybody first, and then make sure our children, either you're a mother or not, but that new generation just there, it's going to be like not feeling we just give up, you know, just that also. Never give up, and always having, if we have to fight for like one idea for the rest of our lives, we will do, you know, and it's enough, and we activists just for that, because we just like choose one action and we're never gonna let go. And that's what humanity is so beautiful. And we're missing a part of it. We're missing something huge, but we're also capable of making magic for sure. So.
Thank you. Well, what an inspiring, brilliant conversation. We're out of time, but it's been magic. I'm absorbing so much, and it's been so nice to be with you guys. And thank you so much for coming and for listening. And thank you to all for being here and knowing so much. I feel a little bit more knowledgeable because I've sat with you, so thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. Oh, and thank you to Cartier for bringing us together. Thank you to Cartier for bringing us together, because that is one action, isn't it?
Yeah.
That unifies, and that's what we need. Thank you to Cartier.